Welcome to the Felt Dyslexic Artist Interview. My name is Liz Buckridge. For me, as a dyslexic artist, other artists and creatives have always been my number one inspiration. In these interviews, we talk with artists and creatives who share their stories and gain insight into their process from inspiration to art tips, career building, and more. We're so lucky to listen to the wisdom of Kim Fuller today. I'm so excited to hear about her past and future projects and share insights on life as an artist. Hi, Kim.
Hello, Liz.
Thank you for talking with us today.
Oh my God, I'm so excited. This is fun.
Yay. I'm going to jump right in. So, describe the art you make. What medium do you primarily work in, and why do you choose that medium?
Yeah, so I am a photographer, and I think of art as a creative process in general. So I make a lot of things, but photography's been my main medium, and I was drawn to it because I found it a way to connect with people. So, I was exposed to a lot of different kinds of art, but when I picked up a camera and realized that when I put it up to my face, people sort of had a reaction to that, like, oh, I'm being seen and looked at. And it had a really fun, playful way of connecting me to people. And so that was my early beginnings and why I think I was so drawn to photography. A lot has changed since then. And I know we have more questions, but that's probably the main reason why I got into photography.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you work in any other mediums?
So I do a lot of writing, which I didn't really think of myself as a writer back in the day. Um, I wasn't like a big reader because I tend to fall asleep when I read. It's like my way of going to sleep at night. I'm like, let me read a book. Um, and it's come about because it's another really beautiful way for me to express myself and sort of work on my inner coming outwardly, and people can take that in at their own pace, just like you can sort of looking at art, I think. And so I found that writing has been another beautiful way for me to share.
That's cool.
Yeah.
How did you get into making art? Can you tell us about your background and how you first became interested in art?
Sure. I don't know if I became interested in art. I feel like it's in us, right? Like it was something that was maybe brought out, but I was surrounded by artists. So starting with my grandfather, who was a wood crafts person, he built his own house. He used to always make things in his basement, and I just loved going over there and like smelling the wood and that sawdust and all that. My mother's an artist. Um, I was born in the 64, so the 60s were like a time of like hippies and art shows and everybody out on sidewalk art. My mother would take us everywhere. So I was always surrounded by art and artists. And we would go to these sidewalk shows and she would be doing pastel portraits of people. So again, like people stuff. And so I would see all this art and I was around kind of creative people and expression. And the 60s were like all about like self-expression. So it just had this way of influencing me, I think, to take in the world in a certain way. My grandmother on my dad's side was an artist, and we stayed with her a lot. My dad was in the military, and so when he was away, my mom would go visit him, and we would stay with my grandparents. And so my grandmother on my dad's side was an artist, and she had this attic that in her house that was just all her work, and it was just everywhere. And so we would always go up there and she would have something that we could do. She never let us buy a coloring book. She's like, that is not creating art, or whatever. But she would let me get these little models, like these little, like car things that you could put together, like the little teeny pieces and the so I was allowed to do that. And then she would have other forms of art like all the time. So from then on, my mom taught art. She always had art things going on. When we moved to Newport, we also had an attic that she kind of turned into an art space. It was just around me all the time. Creativity, um, self-expression, dance, movement, all of that it was just in my bones, I guess. Yeah, I was very fortunate.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that is cool. How did you get into your specific style? What themes or subjects inspire your work?
Yeah, so like I said, my dad was military and we moved so often. And like I said in the beginning, the camera allowed me to connect to people. So I think in my early times, I really was focused on people. and connecting with people. And I loved faces. I liked hearing people's stories. That's how I got to know people, was through my camera. I would have the camera. I was at a new school, and it was like, take my picture, and it would open up a conversation. So it really became this great way to meet people. And so I think as I move forward, and my interest in different people and having moved around so much and seen a lot of different kind of people, I realized it was a really interesting thing to study, at least for my brain. And so I kept at it. So my work has almost always been about portrait work. I have another side of me that is what I call my contemplative side, my mindful side, which comes into the portrait work, but it's mindful photography, I call it. And it's something that I designed and kind of thought about when I discovered Buddhism and mindfulness. That's a whole other story, which we can talk about if you have time. But anyway, it influenced my work a lot. And so I think that combination of being present for individuals was really important to me because I saw the power of that. And then practicing that while I'm doing the portrait work has been a beautiful combination. But that contemplative side has also led me to photographing in a contemplative way. So taking away what I'm identifying the object as and seeing it in its true essence, if you will. So breaking away from the concepts of this is a plant or a tree or a person, and looking at the shapes, colors, lines, textures, light, shadow, and that's kind of the it. And so trying to observe the world from a more contemplative space versus the sort of dualistic version that we tend to have of like what it is and what we make it mean. So there's this dance between those two things that comes into play all the time. And it helps us navigate the world, obviously, when we name things and we can talk about it. But there's also a way of stepping away from that and just being really present for what we see and how we take it in a different way. Yeah.
That's
Deep.
cool. Yeah, that's cool. I love that. I love it so much. So do you consider yourself neurodivergent or neurotypical?
It's a funny question to me because I feel like going back to labels, right? And naming things. I can't imagine that there's actually anyone or a baseline for neurotypical. Like, what is that baseline? Because I have never met anyone with the same brain processing as the next person. And I've met a lot of people in my work. And I feel like it's such a strange thing because I'm married to someone who's considered ADD. We adopted a young boy who had a lot of early traumas and had PTSD slash ADD slash dysregulation slash, whatever. And I feel like it's one of those terms that, I don't know, does it come from our conditioning? Does it come from our life's experiences? Does it come from somebody talking to us in a certain way and saying, you need to think this way? I don't know the answer to that question. I guess in the general context of neurodivergent versus neurotypical, I guess I'd be categorized as neurotypical, but I also think sometimes I think the weirdest shit ever. And I'm like, I didn't realize that I thought like a bunch of artists think until I got to art school. I'm like, oh, these people think more like I do. So I just feel like all of us think we don't fit sometimes because of the way we think about things. And until we find other people who think like that or work like that or act like that, we all feel neurodivergent, I think. I don't know. This is just my feeling. And I also think we have to navigate how we're wired for ourselves. If it's working for you, go for it. If you're whatever, go for it, do it, put it into play. If it's not, then by all means work on it. So I think it's like one of those words and I'm just like, whatever. Because my husband functions just fine. It sometimes drives me crazy because it's different from how I might do something, but it doesn't mean it's not working for him. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah.
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 Because I just think that's such a strange, I don't like putting anything in a box because I think we're all so unique. Yeah.
I love that. Have you faced any challenges or setbacks in your art career, and how did you overcome them?
That was the one question that stumped me when I was reading over your questions, because I truly think that like obstacles are going to come up all the time. And it's how we navigate them that make them really big or small. Sure, I've faced things where I'm like, oh crap, am I going to get more work? Or, my work has typically been for hire. It hasn't been like I'm making art, putting it on a wall and hoping I sell it necessarily. Um, the stumbling blocks have probably come from my own mind around like I'm not enough, or this isn't good enough, or will they like my work, or oh my gosh, they're paying me X amount of dollars, I've really got to show up differently, all that sort of internal narrative kind of stuff. um, but I don't know, I certainly hit blocks where I'm like I don't have any ideas, but I try not to make it mean anything more than it's just not happening. And that's okay. I'll just do something else because I feel like inspiration comes when it comes. And if I fight it, then it never comes. But the more open and present I stay, the more it comes. Is that helpful?
Yeah, I think that's how you overcome it.
Yeah. By just kind of observing and being really open to like where is it going to show up, and I think keeping myself inspired by new visuals and new experiences, I get those aha moments. But it's really when I'm super quiet and I just like sit in my meditation or whatever that inspiration tends to come in. So when I really want it to come in, if I'm really feeling blocked, I'll just sit and kind of ask and say like, okay, what's next? And usually it starts to come in. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
kind of cool.
I love that. Where did you grow up?
I was born in Rhode Island. I've lived in California. I've lived in different parts of Florida, a couple places in Virginia, and then back in Rhode Island again. So Navy kid, moved around a lot. Um, this is home now just because I think sometimes when you go to college somewhere, it starts to feel like home. But my parents also had retired from the military the same year that I graduated high school in Virginia. They put my sister and I in a little apartment when I was 17. We lived by ourselves in this apartment, and my parents took off and moved onto a sailboat with my little sister. So my big sister and I were on this, in this little apartment in Virginia, working our summer before college. My parents brought the boat up and picked me up, dropped me off in Providence. I didn't even know RISD was in the city back before the internet. You could see this. I'd never visited the school. So that was kind of wild, like showing up in the city. And I had never really lived in the city. I'd always lived on the water somewhere on the coast because my dad was a pilot and all that. And wherever the carriers were was where we were. So that was new. So I feel like I grew up in Providence, but I've lived in a lot of different places. But I grew up wherever my family was, and I think that was really what was key for me. Is I always felt safe. I'm very fortunate in the like growing up world because I had stable parents, and they were very kind and loving and kind of open. They really didn't put a lot of pressure on us. And really supported the things that we love to do. Because my sister was a musician, I was an artist. My little sister was like, I don't know what I want to do, but they were like, we'll support whatever you choose. So it was really like a free thinking kind of family life. But I always felt safe. So I really kind of grew up wherever we were with them. But yeah, Rhode Island's become home for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So besides doing art in your grandmother's attic, did you do art when you were a kid?
Yes. So I was always creating. Like I loved I mean I remember like sitting, I think we were in Florida, and just sitting on the curb and seeing sand on the ground, right? And just having fun just drawing in the sand, like making imagery in the sand. And then I used to always make games. My dad traveled in the military, and he brought home this pachinko game, which was like this game where all these marbles come falling down, and it reminded me of pinball. And we learned how to make pinball machines. So you'd make this piece of wood and you put the nails in, and you make these rubber band kind of things that would shoot the marble up, and you had it bump against all the. So I used to make those things all the time. I was always making doll houses out of cardboard boxes, making the furniture. And my mom was very into, she had a lot of fabric lying around at times, so we'd make those felt paper dolls with the clothes and so I was always crafting. And then whenever she had art materials out, I was always making things out of tissue paper and all that, because I didn't really get into photography until I was a teenager, because it was kind of started out with a Polaroid camera, and then I got my first real 35 millimeter camera of my own when I was 16. I think that was my 16th birthday present. But we were living on a sailboat, so that was like my prized possession, because I didn't really have stuff, because the boat was small. So we had just a little cubby of things, and so my camera was like my thing. It was like my one item, right? And so I just cherished it. But as a kid, I was always drawing, crafting, because we didn't have like the stuff you have now. I mean, and so I just made something out of anything. And my sisters and I were always putting on shows, like for the neighborhood, like little, what do you call them? Little talent show almost, and we would dance and sing and do all this stuff. So it was just always a very creative environment. Yeah, just kind of silly.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite colorway for your art? And is the colorway for your art different or the same as the colors in your house?
Is black and white a colorway?
It is. It is.
So, yeah, I love black and white photography. I think there's something about the way again, it's like taking away a layer that simplifies what we're seeing. And I feel like it helps us see without that overlay of labeling and naming and all that. So I love black and white photography. My house is full of color, as you can see. So I love color. I love bold color. I love subtle palettes. But when it comes to my photography, I would say black and white is probably my go-to. Yeah. However, when I'm doing the more contemplative work, I do kind of, oddly enough, being that I'm kind of trying to take away the labeling or the naming of things, but sometimes the color plays a big role in what I'm shooting. So there's a dance more with that style. But when it comes to portrait work, I really like black and white. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Describe the space where you make your art.
My head. Can you describe that? No. So I will shoot anywhere. I mean, the world, is so inspiring. And everywhere I go, I love going somewhere new, because I always say it's like, my new eye candy, right? And I will create anywhere out of anything. Like that's kind of what I try to keep in my mindset. So like I said, I'm writing a lot, and ideas and the creative mindset, I think, is what makes me an artist more than the actual, sometimes physical creation of things, is that I like to think outside the box and say, what else is possible? Or how can I do this differently? Because I've owned my own business forever. And sometimes the way people do business, I just can't do it that way. It doesn't feel good. I won't be motivated by it and all that. So sometimes creativity for me is that way of thinking in a way that works for me. And I get inspiration for that through hiking, through talking to people, to listening, like really deeply listening to anything, sounds, music, someone talking, reading, just so I forget the question, but I feel like I think, oh, where does inspiration come from? Yeah,
Well,
it
no,
just,
like what space,
yeah.
where do you work?
So yeah, so it's everywhere. But when I'm shooting, I sometimes shoot in my home, and I set up my stuff and then I take it back down again. I used to have another space that I did that in, but I found that a lot of my work was on location. So I like to move around and think about where's a person going to fit, or what makes their brand, if you will, because I do a lot of business branding work for people, or portrait work, and trying to incorporate the environment with who they are. So anywhere. Yeah.
That's cool.
I'm not neurodivergent. I'm not going all over the place.
My favorite. It's my favorite. How did your school system or school systems support your interest in art growing up?
Well, every school was different, honestly. Like, I don't even remember doing art in some schools. And so I was also I was an athlete. So when I'd move to a new school, I would instantly join some team. Like usually track was my kind of go-to, and softball. So I, that was my first thing. And then one of the schools I went to in Norfolk, Virginia, I joined well, a couple times I was in the band. So music was more where I was supported. But art classes per se, I didn't really get into a lot of that until high school, and I like got on the yearbook staff and took photography. But a lot of my classes were outside of the school. So whether it was my parents, my grandparents, all that kind of influence. And then I took lessons from different teachers kind of here and there. And then I did a photography program through the school, but it was outside of the school. So in school, I was not doing a lot of art until I kind of got on the yearbook and took photography and did that as a complementary kind of combo. But yeah, I mean, it was there, but I think because I kept going to new schools, I couldn't get ingrained and get the right courses and schedule to fit. So it was all outside of the school for me. I didn't really do a lot of art in school.
That's cool.
Yeah.
How do you see your work evolving or changing in the future? What do you have planned?
So I'm actually, I still love my photography work and I still do it for my career. But I just finished a mindful photography course that's going to be launching in June that was really fun to write, because I had to write 12 lessons that were 30 minutes long. And I would love to actually teach that live as well. It's going to be a video course through the Great Courses, which is like a continued learning streaming service. And I'm super excited about that because they kind of found me and, said, hey, you want to do this thing? So I'm excited about that. And and it would be interesting if I can then, which they support actually, is do a retreat and where I can teach that live. So I like the idea of workshopping and using the photography to complement people's inner journeys and their own spiritual side, because mindfulness and Buddhism and self exploration is really important to me, and it's something that I'm also moving forward with in my newest business. It's about 5 years old, called Born to Rise, which is about storytelling. And so taking the idea of storytelling through the camera and storytelling verbally and through the written word are all kind of coming together in this beautiful symbiotic kind of way. So I'm very excited about that and thinking about how I can support people through creativity, introspection, and storytelling, and helping us have a fun way to access that kind of inner journey, because sometimes that's really scary for people, especially if they've had heavy traumas or a lot of struggle in their life. I'm trying to make it really accessible and approachable for people who are creatives and who are a little different, or maybe want to try something that's not so okay, you got to sit on a cushion and you got to meditate for this amount of time, and because that can feel really tricky, and it doesn't have to be that way. So that's where a lot of my work is going. That creative side is being applied to different ways of using it for more mindful and introspective work. How's that?
Same.
Yeah, right?
And I just joined your group.
Yes,
So.
yes, I have a little membership, so you can be a part of all that if that sounds fun to you.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Let's see here. So, is making art or your photography an emotional process or a strategic process for you?
Yes. First, it's emotion. So it's probably it probably starts out more strategic and then becomes emotional. So let's say somebody hires me. They say I need some portraits done, or I need some pictures done for my website or whatever. And immediately I start going into like, okay, they look like this, they do this kind of work. What kind of environment might we shoot it? And we start a conversation. And so then I get kind of emotionally attached or interested, I should say, in them. And I want to hear their story. And then I think about how am I going to craft that set of images so that their story is told so that the clients can feel attracted to them, right? So the idea is to help them tell their story in a way that's attractive and they can attract all the clients. I work with a lot of coaches, entrepreneurs, businesswomen who are the face of their business. And so then I get really involved. And then the day of the shoot, I set myself up in a way to be really present so that I don't overthink, like, I have to have this photo and it's got to look like this and the light has to be perfect and they have to pose this way and that way. I try to stay really open to how they show up. And then if they need guidance, just really observe and watch how they move and where they're most comfortable. And it's such a beautiful, beautiful thing to see someone who's like really nervous in front of the camera and they start to just kind of open when I can remember to stay present and not have an expectation for them or judge or do any of that. They just sort of show up. It starts to unfold and we become intertwined with one another. Like they are responding to me, I'm responding to them, and the camera is just this objective thing in the middle that only documents what's there, which I love about cameras. And so whatever I'm projecting is the choice of the time the shutter is clicked, but the camera itself is such a beautiful object of capturing only what's there. So it's making sure that I'm present and seeing what's there and what I'm feeling and what I think they want to come across, but also just to show, like almost as a mirror to possibility for them, because sometimes we can't see what's right in front of us, right? And so there's a lot of feeling and emotion in there, but there's also a strategy to help me get present enough to see that in them and not just what is coming from my side. So I have to let go of a lot, to let go of my expectation or my assumption about who they are, right? And really try to see who they are. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And it's really fun.
Yeah.
It's a deeper connection to me. And I love working that way because otherwise I feel like it's very transactional. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that my next question is, can you walk us through your creative process from idea to finished piece? But I feel like you just answered that.
Yeah. And, God knows what finished actually means, right?
Yeah.
Because I feel like after I do a shoot with someone, then there's still this process of them seeing the images. We talk about them. Which ones do I like? Which ones do they like? Then they show it to a million people. So there's this continuum of self-exploration when we see our image, when we've shared something that's personal to us, like my work is personal, right? I can't have it not be personal in some way. And this desire, like watching my desire for them to like it. So it's just a continuum. There's no end. It's really no end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you combine the art you love to make or the photos you love to shoot and what you sell?
So the contemplative work that I do, I don't really show it to too many people. I might use it when I'm writing a blog post. I might insert an image or something like that. But that work is really about my practice of being mindful. So I give myself, a few minutes when I'm really, especially when I'm super anxious or I'm trying to work through something. I get my camera, and sometimes it's just my cell phone, and I'll walk around like my backyard or somewhere, and I just get into camera head mode, which I call this objective, like just what am I seeing? So that I get present, right? And just I start just looking and shooting and getting in close, backing up, seeing relationships, seeing light, just trying to look at things objectively so that I can clear away all the clutter of the other stuff. Um, Sorry, what was the question?
How do you combine the art you love to make and the art you sell?
Yeah, so that's the art that I just make. And it feels like art because I feel very connected to, I often do that in nature, or even if I go in a city, I feel more connected to the environment when I do that and to my surroundings. But the art that I sell is more commercial. It really is. I haven't done the whole like artist thing where I make my pictures into something that can hang on a wall and people can observe it. It's more probably digital or experiential, so to speak. However, I wouldn't mind getting back to that. So it's something that I'm playing with. I'm starting to look at some of the imagery that I've created over the years and seeing if it's something I do want to like refocus on and make prints and do the whole thing or something. I don't know. It might not be prints. It could be something else. We'll see. It hasn't hit yet. I got to sit down and meditate on that.
I'm excited. This is very exciting. So, how do people find you to hire you?
Want like actual websites and stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah. So kimfullerphotography.com, but also my newest website and my current work is born2rise.live, Live. I'm on Instagram, born.to.rise. I'm also a mindful photography coach on Instagram. But those are my two, main ones. But the websites, it's kind of fun. It's interactive. You can look at a lot of different stuff. So born2rise.live, probably the best place. You can email me through there or hop on my list and read all my, mindful posts and all kinds of things. So yeah.
Yeah. We'll put that information in the show notes.
Okay.
Can you share a recent project or a piece of work that you're particularly happy about?
So I'll go back to that course that I just created. When they first asked me to do it, I had taught mindful photography, but it was like a 6-week course. It was interactive. People would shoot and then I could like reply and help them with their images and stuff like that. This was actually writing 30-minute lessons, 12 of them. I thought, what am I going to talk about for that length of time? But I started really tapping into my Buddhist philosophies and then finding ways to explore them through the camera. And I just started getting really excited about it when I finally kind of put that all together. And I talked to a lot of artist friends about like, what would you want? Like, what do you think about this? And my best friend connected me to a couple of people who had done different artist kind of courses and said, watch these and just get inspired. So I'm very happy about how that's come out. I finished recording right before Christmas, and that'll launch in June. So I think that's going to be really cool and I hope helpful for people. So I'm very proud of that project. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. And I'm in front of the camera, not behind the camera, which is really interesting.
Do you like it?
I didn't mind it. It's just a different, yeah, it's just different.
Yeah.
But yeah, I am where I am. I can't change myself. So
How do you stay motivated?
I think by looking at other art, um, I love going to galleries and museums. Like sometimes and I love sculpture. I love 3D work. Um, I think looking at different mediums and like talking to other artists because they do have really unique views of the world. Um, helps me think about something differently, which I think triggers a new idea for me. So like our brain's going like this, right? It's doing the same thing pretty much every day. But then something comes along and it's like a little fork in the road and you go, bonk, and you're like, oh, right? Like that light bulb goes off. You're like, oh, I hadn't thought of that, or I hadn't gone in that direction. And so when that happens, I just get super excited. Like even talking to you today, reading your questions was like new things were popping up in my head. So I find inspiration honestly everywhere, but it's if I'm when I'm present. If I'm lost in my own crap, I'm not creative at all. But if I can stay present and just be in observation mode, then it's everywhere and with everyone.
Are there any artists or creatives who have influenced or inspired your work?
Yeah, so um honestly locally, like there's so many amazing artists in town that I have become friends with who have inspired me a lot. um the late great, I'll call him, Luke Randall was a very good friend of mine who passed obviously, and I used to love talking with him. Like he had just the most amazing questions all the time. He was a real asker of questions, and um I loved his work. I thought it was very much storytelling, right? And then, old school, going back to some photographers, loved Dorothea Lange. I loved Annie Leibovitz, like portrait photographers. I liked Irving Penn's portrait work, um, the black and whites that were just kind of done on white, really simple because you could really just get into the person's eyes. And I actually did a project that was very inspired by his style a while back. And so, I like I said, I try to look at a lot of things, but those photographers, Stieglitz, Cartier-Bresson, like those decisive moment kind of, street photographers, I really like. But yeah, there's a lot of good artists in Rhode Island, and people that I try to just talk to everybody and get into their little story a little bit. Like, what are you thinking about?
Same.
It's kind of fun. Yeah.
What advice would you give to an aspiring artist looking to pursue a career in the arts?
Go for it. Don't let anyone tell you that you can't make a living doing that. Um, art is being an artist is about a way of thinking. So even if you end up going into business, keep your art brain on fire. It's going to help you because you're going to be able to come up with ideas and solutions and strategies that maybe someone else wouldn't think of. And yeah, it's just that way of thinking, right? Like, so never say you're not an artist if you're not creating actual artwork, right? Again, it's a label thing. Like, I'm a painter, I'm a this, I'm a that. If you can just keep saying you're an artist and you apply that to the way you navigate the world, you're good.
I agree.
Yeah.
Okay, so what is your favorite book, movie, song, podcast?
Mm. So my favorite song is probably Imagine. Imagine all the people. I'm very idealistic about the fact that we can all be at peace at some point. So that's probably my favorite song. Although I do love Led Zeppelin and like some kind of classic Southern rock and stuff because I grew up down there. It was like I was really influenced by Van Halen, Led Zeppelin, type bands like that. So I got a lot of favorite songs. I love music. I even like rap. I like hip hop. I like, anything with a beat, and I'm out on the dance floor. So lots of good music. Favorite books. I read a lot of the Buddhist Dharma. So anything, the Dalai Lama, The Art of Happiness was probably one of my first books that I read from him and really was very moving. My favorite movie is Edward Scissorhands. Talk about a weird movie. Love that movie so much. And it's probably because he's so unique and the way he takes his individual talent and puts it into this beautiful way of expressing himself with the hairdos and the bushes and the shrubbery. He's not letting his weirdness that other people see make him play small. And it's something that I am passionate about with helping women through, is don't let anyone make you feel small or play small. And how do we amplify our voices and express ourselves so that no one feels that they are not authentic to who they are? So I think there's something about that in that movie that just moves me so much. And of course, the wacky colors and the just the whole, like, the way the town, it's just, I love that movie so much.
I'm gonna rewatch it this week. Oh my god, I love that movie. Is there a book, movie, song, podcast that you recommend over and over to people that's different?
No, I mean, like I said, I've just started becoming a reader, and I've read so many, a couple good ones, but I never remember the title. I never remember the author. I just enjoy the book when it's there, and then I tend to put it aside. But it's just one of those. Yeah, I'm not very good at that kind of thing. I don't really listen to a lot of podcasts, honestly. I listen to the Huberman Report, which is all like science and health and wellness, and I listen to Armchair Quarterback. Is that what it's called? Um,
with Dax Shepard.
With Dax Shepard. But that's, and occasionally like random ones here and there, but I'm not a big podcast listener. I tend to need a lot of quiet when I'm doing things. So I'm not a podcast. And when I walk, I just want to walk. So yeah, I don't have anything. Sorry, people, and nothing to recommend.
I thought you recommended a lot, actually. So what would you like to talk about that I didn't ask?
I don't know. I guess what I would love to talk about a little bit is my family. Um, my my children have been such amazing teachers for me, and I think that um, I'm really proud of my two older children and the ways that they accepted my youngest son, who I met at a group home in Rhode Island. I was doing some volunteer work, and he's now a part of our family, and he became part of our family when he was 8. I was about 2 years into my Buddhist and mindfulness practice at that time, and looking for some more guidance and spiritual teachers and monks and gurus and all that. There's not a lot of that in Newport, in that form that I was looking for, Buddhist monks or whatever. I had a couple of teachers, but bringing him into our family, um, he and I say this in the book that I wrote about him, he became my greatest spiritual teacher. And my artist mind and the mindfulness practice was so helpful in raising him, because he had a lot of, talk about neurodivergence. His mind was very dysregulated, probably a PTSD kind of form. He had what's called attachment issues, attachment disorder. So he would get dysregulated. And it was something I'd never witnessed or experienced before. And neither had my children, neither had my husband. And my husband realized his ADD by learning about what my son had been diagnosed with, and actually took one of his pills one day, one of his like Adderall or whatever. And I was like, why'd you do that? That's crazy. And he goes, well, I wanted to know what he was experiencing. And I said, well, what happened? And he goes, the white noise went away in my head. And I was like, what white noise? And he's like, I always have this sort of static in my brain. I'm like, wow. And so he learned, he's like, I think I have ADD. So I was like, that's crazy. He doesn't take any med. My husband doesn't take any meds for that. Neither does my other son, my youngest now. But I'll just say that through creativity and the mindfulness and what we all practiced together at that time has, I think, opened us all in this a more state of being willing to look at how we can go inward to express outwardly. And my youngest is now 24, and literally will call me when he has like an awakening or he realizes something, and he'll share it with me because he knows how much work we did when he was younger, and that he's making progress by using these tools. And it's so moving. And my older kids also are very they're seekers. They're willing to seek and look for things that help them outside of the box. And I think that that's what I'm so proud of them for, because they may not be although my daughter's quite artistic, I think they're all very creative. So I'll just say that I feel very blessed that what I have learned as a mother, being a mother, and what's come back, like the back and forth through it all, has been just profoundly. I have a lot of gratitude for that. Yeah. Awesome. So.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you for letting us into your home. I felt inspired for sure. I've always felt inspired by you.
Thank you.
Yeah, you've always been in the background of inspiration for me. And much love.
Yeah. Thanks, Liz.
We'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you for listening. Yay.